The air inside the Amani Foundation gala was thick with the scent of wealth, expensive perfume, rare wines and power. African elites from across the continent gathered under the golden chandeliers of the Nairobi Grand Hotel, draped in their finest designer wear. Billionaires exchanged polite nods, politicians whispered behind diamond-studded glasses, and the press circled hunting for headlines. Kwame Achebe stood tall near the entrance, adjusting the sleeve of his custom tuxedo. He had walked into 1,000 events like this before, effortlessly commanding attention, soaking in admiration, shaking hands with men who ruled industries. But tonight, something felt off. A strange energy crawled under his skin. He chalked it up to exhaustion. Running a billion-dollar empire came with its price. Then, in the middle of raising his champagne flute to his lips, his body froze. Across the room, bathed in the soft glow of the chandelier, stood a woman he had never expected to see again. Zaina. For a second, he thought he was imagining her. Maybe his past had finally found a way to haunt him. But no, this was real. She was more breathtaking than he remembered. Her dark skin glowed under the lights, her emerald green dress hugging every perfect curve, her hair cascading down her back in soft waves. A queen, and she wasn't alone. A little boy stood beside her, holding her hand, watching the crowd with curious eyes. Kwame's heart stopped. He didn't need anyone to tell him. He knew. The child had his face. Same sharp jawline, same deep-set eyes, same dimpled chin. The champagne glass trembled in his grip. 3 years ago, he had walked away from Zaina, convinced that leaving her was the right thing to do, that love was a weakness, that she would be better off without him. Now, staring at the little boy who looked like his mirror image, he felt a deep, twisting regret coil in his chest. Zaina turned as if sensing his gaze. Their eyes met. For a second, everything around them disappeared. The room, the voices, the music, all gone. Just silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken words. Then, without a flicker of emotion, Zaina broke the gaze and turned away. Kwame felt as if he had been punched in the gut. She hadn't flinched, not even for a second. No shock. No anger, just indifference. As if he no longer mattered, as if he was nothing. But Kwame Achebe had not built an empire by accepting defeat. He needed answers, and tonight he would get them. Kwame's grip tightened around the champagne glass, his mind racing. The child had to be his. The timeline matched perfectly. 3 years ago, he had left Zaina, convinced that his growing empire and ambitions had no room for a family. Now, standing just a few feet away from them, his heart pounded with a realization he never thought he'd have to face. Zaina hadn't just moved on. She had built a life without him. His eyes remained locked on the little boy. He couldn't be more than 2, maybe 3. Kwame saw himself in the child's features, the sharp jawline, the intense gaze. The resemblance was undeniable. But if he was his son, why had Zaina never reached out? Why had she kept him a secret? He set down his champagne glass, his legs already moving before his mind could catch up. He weaved through the crowd, past politicians and socialites who tried to greet him, past journalists who snapped photos, until he was just a few steps away from her. Zaina was speaking to an elderly woman, smiling as she gestured toward a table filled with donation pledges. "Zaina," Kwame said, his voice firm but controlled. She didn't turn immediately. Instead, she finished her sentence, nodded politely at the woman she was speaking to, and then, finally, her dark eyes flicked up to meet his. No surprise, no hesitation, no warmth. "Kwame," she said, her voice smooth, composed. That single word cut him deeper than he expected. It held none of the softness he once knew, none of the love that had kept him awake at night, wondering if he had made the right choice by leaving. "Can we talk?" he asked, barely able to keep the urgency from his voice. Zaina lifted a perfectly arched brow. "Talk?" She glanced around at the crowded gala, then down at the little boy who was now clutching her dress. "Now?" His gaze flickered to the child again. "Who is he?" Zaina let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You don't get to ask that question," she said, tilting her head slightly. Kwame's jaw clenched. He had expected anger, maybe even resentment. But this cool, untouchable version of her, he hadn't prepared for that. You should get back to your donors, she added, stepping past him as if he were a stranger. Wouldn't want to disappoint your adoring public. Zaina, wait. She didn't. She kept walking, her son in tow, disappearing into the crowd. Kwame exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. His mind was a storm. This wasn't over. If that boy was his son, he would find out the truth, and nothing would stop him. Kwame had never been a man who let things slip through his fingers. He had built an empire from the ground up, with sheer determination and relentless ambition. So when Zaina turned her back on him and disappeared into the crowd, a fire lit inside him. This wasn't over. He needed answers, and he needed them tonight. His eyes scanned the room, following the emerald-green silhouette of her dress as she moved gracefully between guests, offering smiles and exchanging pleasantries. She had changed. There was a quiet confidence about her, an untouchable grace. She no longer carried the vulnerability she once had when she was with him. It unnerved him. "Sir, are you all right?" Kwame snapped out of his thoughts to see his business partner, Jidenna, watching him curiously. "I'm fine," Kwame said, though his voice was strained. Jidenna followed his gaze and smirked. "Ah? So you've seen her?" Kwame turned sharply. "You knew she'd be here?" Jidenna chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Everyone knows Zaina is one of the biggest philanthropists in Africa right now. She's a rising star. You, of all people, should have kept up." Kwame's stomach twisted. How had he not known? How had he been so blind to the fact that she had become a force of her own? "You look like a man who just got slapped by fate," Jidenna said, amusement in his tone. Kwame ignored him and set his glass down. "Excuse me." Without another word, he pushed through the crowd, determined. He found her outside on the balcony, leaning against the railing, gazing at the city lights. The little boy, his son, was nowhere in sight. For a moment, he simply looked at her. The moonlight kissed her skin, making her look ethereal, almost untouchable. But he knew better. He had touched her once, held her, loved her in ways he had never loved anyone else. And then he had left her. He stepped forward. "Zaina." She didn't turn around. "Are you stalking me now, Kwame?" He exhaled sharply. "I need to know the truth." She finally turned, her gaze unreadable. "The truth? Now you care about the truth?" His jaw clenched. "Is he mine?" Zaina stared at him for a long moment, then let out a soft sigh. "What does it matter?" Kwame felt his temper flare. "What does it matter?" he repeated, stepping closer. "You disappeared from my life. You were pregnant, and you never told me. Now 3 years later, I see you with a child who looks exactly like me, and you expect me to walk away?" Zaina crossed her arms. "You already walked away, Kwame. 3 years ago. You made your choice." Regret clawed at him, but he pushed it down. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "For who? Yourself?" The words stung more than he wanted to admit. She turned back toward the city, gripping the railing. "Yes, Kwame. He's yours." The confirmation sent a jolt through him. He had a son. A real, living, breathing child in this world. A child he had missed the first 3 years of his life. Kwame swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" Zaina didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quiet, but firm. "Because you didn't deserve to know." Her words landed like a punch to his gut. Before he could respond, she turned, her eyes cold and unwavering. "I don't need anything from you, Kwame. Not your money, not your name, not your guilt. I built a life for my son, and I intend to keep it that way." Kwame took a step forward. "He's my son, too." She lifted a brow. "Funny how you remember that now." Anger and regret warred inside him. "I want to be in his life, Zaina." She studied him, her face unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she said, "We'll see about that." And just like that, she walked away again, leaving Kwame standing in the cold night air, his heart pounding, his world forever changed. Kwame barely slept that night. He sat in his penthouse, staring out over the Nairobi skyline, his mind replaying Zaina's words over and over again. We'll see about that. That wasn't a no, it wasn't a yes either. It was a challenge. He had spent years building his empire, turning every loss into a victory, every obstacle into an opportunity. But now, the biggest fight of his life wasn't about business or power. It was about a child he had never met, a woman he had abandoned, and the wreckage of the past he had to face. He wasn't going to let this slip away. By morning, he had a plan. Zaina had always been an early riser, a habit she had never shaken from her days of struggling to build her charity from the ground up. She sipped her coffee in the small garden behind her house, watching as her son, Malik, played with his toy cars in the grass. He had her heart, but there was no denying it. He looked more like Kwame with every passing day. Her chest tightened at the thought of last night. Seeing Kwame again had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. She had expected anger, maybe even denial, but not the raw intensity in his eyes. Not the way his voice had cracked when he realized Malik was his son, and now she had no doubt he would try to be in their lives. The question was, would she let him? A knock at the gate pulled her from her thoughts. She frowned, setting down her cup. No one visited her unannounced. She walked to the gate, peered through the small opening, then froze. Kwame standing there, looking as sharp as ever in a tailored suit, but there was something different, a seriousness in his expression that she wasn't prepared for. She almost didn't open the gate. Almost, but she did. "Kwame," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "this is not your home." His eyes flickered just briefly at the words, "We need to talk." Zaina crossed her arms. "I said what I needed to say last night. You said we'll see." His voice was low, firm. "So I'm here to see." She exhaled, sharply glancing over her shoulder. Malik was still playing, unaware. "Not here," she muttered, stepping outside and closing the gate behind her. "What do you want?" "You already know," Kwame said. "I want to be in my son's life." Her jaw tightened. "You don't just get to show up and declare that, Kwame. You walked away from me when I needed you most." Regret flashed in his eyes, but he didn't back down. "And I will live with that mistake for the rest of my life. But I won't make another. One by walking away from him, too." Zaina folded her arms, scanning his face, searching for weakness, for cracks. "And what exactly do you think will happen? You think you'll take him to fancy restaurants? Buy him expensive gifts? Play good dad while you run your billion-dollar empire? He's not a trophy, Kwame." "I know that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't want to buy my way in. I want to earn it." Zaina let out a bitter laugh. "You think you can? Just what? Take him to the park a few times and erase 3 years of absence?" Kwame took a step closer, his gaze burning into hers. "No, but I can try. And I won't stop trying." She hated that he looked sincere, hated that, for the first time in years, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once made her believe in forever. But could she trust him? Did she even want to? Silence stretched between them. Finally, she let out a slow breath. "Fine. You want to try? Then we do this on my terms. You don't get to just drop in and play dad when it's convenient for you. You have to prove to me that you're serious." Kwame didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes." Her eyes narrowed. "Good. Then we'll start small. You can see him, but only under my supervision. No taking him anywhere alone. No introducing him to your world of wealth. And if I see even the slightest sign that you're doing this for your own guilt, rather than for him, I'll cut you off. For good." Kwame nodded, his expression unreadable. "Deal." Zaina turned to leave, but before she could take a step, he spoke again. "Zaina," he said softly. She paused. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he admitted, "but I will earn my place in his life, and that if I'm lucky, maybe one day I can earn a place in yours again too." Her heart clenched, but she didn't turn around. "Don't count on it," she said before walking away. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. For the first time in years, Zaina felt like she had lost control of her perfectly built world. She had spent 3 years crafting a life for herself and Malik, one where she was both mother and father, protector and provider. She had worked hard to make sure her son never felt the absence of a father. And now, in a matter of hours, Kwame had shattered that balance. He was back, and worse. He was determined. The next few days felt like walking on a knife's edge. True to his word, Kwame didn't try to bulldoze his way into their lives. Instead, he waited for her to set the pace, but even that made her uneasy. Because no matter how much she wanted to believe he would disappear again, she knew deep down, this time he wouldn't. She had told him he could see Malik under her supervision. Now it was time to test just how serious he was. On Saturday morning, Zaina sat on a bench at Uhuru Park, watching as Malik ran across the playground, his little laughter filling the air. Kwame sat beside her, silent but watchful. He had arrived exactly on time, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him. Dark jeans, a polo shirt, and sneakers. No expensive suit, no polished billionaire look. He was trying, she'd give him that. Malik was still hesitant around him. The little boy had shyly glanced at Kwame when they arrived, but he had mostly stuck to his mother's side. Zaina had to remind herself that this was new for him. He had never known a father, never needed one. And yet, she caught Malik stealing glances at Kwame every now and then, as if trying to figure out who this stranger was. "You don't have to just sit there," she said, breaking the silence. "Go play with him." Kwame exhaled, as if shaking off nerves, then stood up. He walked toward the jungle gym where Malik was climbing, hesitated for a second, then crouched down beside him. "Hey, champ," he said carefully. Malik glanced at him but didn't respond. Kwame pointed at the small soccer ball lying near the swings. "Do you like football?" Malik nodded slowly. Kwame picked up the ball and rolled it toward him. "Want to show me how good you are?" For a moment, Malik just stared at him. Then, slowly, he kicked the ball back. A small, almost imperceptible smile formed on Kwame's face. He rolled the ball back again. This time, Malik kicked it a little harder. Zaina watched, her heart twisting as she saw the two of them interact. Malik was cautious, but there was curiosity in his eyes. He was giving Kwame a chance, even if he didn't understand who he was yet. And Kwame. She had never seen him like this before. Not as a businessman, not as the powerful, unreachable billionaire she had once loved. Here he was just a man trying to connect with a child, trying to be a father. The sight sent a confusing wave of emotions crashing over her. She had spent years resenting him, preparing herself for the possibility that one day he might return. She had convinced herself that if he ever did, she would stand her ground, push him away, and never let him get close again. But watching them now, she wasn't sure anymore. After an hour of playing, Malik finally spoke to him. "Can you do a bicycle kick?" Kwame grinned. "You'll have to teach me." Malik's eyes lit up, and for the first time that day he smiled. At him, Zaina's breath caught. This was dangerous, because if she wasn't careful, she might start to believe that Kwame actually belonged here, and that was something she couldn't afford. Not again. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of change, one that Zaina wasn't sure she was ready for. At first, she had expected Kwame to lose interest, to disappear the moment things got difficult. But he didn't. Instead, he showed up, again and again. He didn't push. He didn't try to force his way into Malik's life. He simply stayed. He came to the park when she allowed him to. He sat with Malik when the little boy colored in his books. He listened when Malik talked about dinosaurs and superheroes. He even learned how to make Malik's favorite peanut butter sandwiches, crusts, cut off just the way he liked them. Slowly, without Zaina realizing it, the walls she had built began to crack. But she wasn't the only one who noticed. "You're playing a dangerous game, my dear," her Aunt Fatima warned one evening, watching as Malik excitedly told Zaina about his day with Kwame. Zaina sighed. "I'm not playing anything, Auntie. He's just spending time with his son." Aunt Fatima shook her head. "Is that all it is?" Zaina didn't answer, because the truth was, she didn't know. One night, after she had put Malik to bed, Zaina stepped onto her small balcony to find Kwame waiting by his car outside her gate. She hesitated, then went down to meet him. "You can't keep showing up at my house," she said, folding her arms. Kwame leaned against the car, his dark eyes unreadable. "I wasn't planning to knock, just needed a minute to think." She frowned. "Think about what?" He exhaled, looking up at the night sky. "About what happens next." Her stomach twisted. "There is no next, Kwame. You're spending time with Malik, and that's all." He turned to face her. "And what about us?" Zaina's breath caught. "There is no us." Kwame studied her, his gaze searching hers. "Are you sure?" She clenched her fists. "You don't get to do this, Kwame. You don't get to walk away, come back years later, and act like—" "I know I hurt you," he interrupted, his voice low. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but Zaina, I never stopped—" "Stop!" She cut him off, shaking her head. "Don't say it. Don't you dare say it." Kwame fell silent, his jaw tightening. She turned away, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You wanted to be in Malik's life, fine, but that's all this is. You and I, we're done." Kwame was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. "If that's what you want," he said, his voice unreadable. Zaina didn't answer, because deep down she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore, and that terrified her more than anything. Zaina tried to convince herself that everything was under control, that letting Kwame see Malik under her supervision didn't mean anything, that she could keep him at a safe distance, that her heart wouldn't betray her. But she was wrong because, despite everything, she could feel herself slipping. It was the little things. The way Malik's eyes lit up when he saw Kwame, the way Kwame was patient with him, even when he made a mess or asked a million questions, the way her son had started calling him Baba without even realizing it, the way she felt when she caught Kwame watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher, something too deep, too familiar. And then, one night, everything changed. Zaina had been working late on a charity project when she got a call from her nanny, Aisha. "Malik has a fever," Aisha said, worry in her voice. "It started in the evening, but now he's burning up. I think you should come home." Zaina's heart dropped. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. She grabbed her things and rushed out. By the time she got home, Malik was curled up in bed, his face flushed with heat, his tiny body shivering. Zaina pressed a hand to his forehead. He was burning up. She felt panic rise in her chest. Malik had never been this sick before. Just as she reached for her phone to call the doctor, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Kwame standing there, his face tight with concern. "Aisha called me," he said. "How is he?" Zaina hesitated, but then she stepped aside, letting him in. Kwame didn't waste a second. He went straight to Malik's bedside, crouching down beside him. Malik blinked up at him, his little face pale. "Baba." Kwame's expression softened. "I'm here, champ," he said gently, brushing a damp curl from his forehead. Zaina swallowed hard. For the next few hours, Kwame stayed by Malik's side. He helped cool him down with damp cloths, murmured soothing words whenever he whimpered, in his sleep. At one point Malik stirred, reaching out a weak hand, and Kwame took it, holding it tightly, as if he would never let go. Zaina stood in the doorway, watching, her chest aching. She had spent years hating this man, but now as she saw him holding their son, something inside her cracked. Maybe it had already been cracking for a while, and that terrified her, because, if she wasn't careful, she might let him back in, and she wasn't sure if she could survive losing him again. The night Malik fell sick changed everything. Zaina had spent so many years telling herself that she didn't need Kwame, that Malik didn't need him, but watching him stay up all night, refusing to leave their son's side, something in her chest tightened. The next morning, Malik's fever finally broke. His small body relaxed, and his breathing evened out. Kwame had barely moved from his bedside, exhaustion written all over his face, but he didn't complain. Zaina stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You should go home and rest," she said softly. Kwame shook his head. "Not until I know he's okay." She exhaled, looking at him, really looking at him. The man in front of her wasn't the same one who had walked away 3 years ago. This man was trying, fighting, And despite everything, she felt herself wanting to believe him. A few days later, Malik had fully recovered, but something had shifted between them. One evening after Malik had gone to bed, Kwame stayed behind. It was the first time they were alone without the weight of the past crushing them. Zaina made tea, her hands shaking slightly. She still wasn't sure why she had let him stay, but she didn't stop herself. Kwame sat across from her, studying her carefully. "You don't have to keep fighting me, Zaina," he said quietly. She let out a dry laugh. "You don't get to say that. I had to fight, Kwame. I had to fight to raise our son alone. I had to fight to make sure he never felt abandoned." Regret flashed in his eyes. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that." She met his gaze, searching for the truth in his words. "Why did you leave?" Kwame exhaled deeply. "Because I was a coward." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I thought love made me weak. I thought building my empire was the most important thing, and that we, were a distraction. But I was wrong." Zaina swallowed. "And now? What do you think now?" His eyes softened. "Now I know that everything I built means nothing if I don't have my family." Her breath caught. Kwame reached for her hand, hesitant. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I don't even expect you to love me again, but Zaina, I want a second chance. Not just with Malik, with you." Her heart pounded. Every part of her wanted to say no, to push him away, to protect herself. But another part, one she had buried for years, whispered that maybe, just maybe, Kwame had finally learned what truly mattered. She looked down at their intertwined fingers. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning.